Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain.
I'm Lynn.
And today we're going to be doing kind of a different sort of review, a different sort of video. This is for the Pocket Paragons game, which we had already done a preview and tutorial back when they did their original Kickstarter. I'll put a link to it up here if you'd like to see how the game is played, because we're not going to go over the mechanics so much again. So again, check out that link if you'd like to see how this game is played. But their new Kickstarter with a couple of new sets should be out a couple of days ago, if all went according to plan before this video is released. This is a guide to which of the previous sets that were already released they're doing new print runs on for the new Kickstarter, which ones you should get and why. So we're going to kind of go over what the characters are in each set, what their abilities are like, what their playstyle is like, and then our sum up. We're going to discuss our ideas of why it is we think you would want to add this on as an add-on purchase when backing the Pocket Paragons Kickstarter. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so to start with, we're going to start off with the most basic of the sets, which is the Pocket Paragons Origins. This is the basic box set in the actual Pocket Paragons universe. It's a fairly standard, like, sword and sorcery universe for the basic set, whereas most of the other sets are actually in universes from other games and such. So, Lynn, why don't you start us off with one of the characters that you like from this set?
Okay. We should also say that don't each of them come with 6 characters?
Yes,
and
indeed.
their cards?
There were also 2 promo characters. I don't know if those will be included or not, but we're going to go over the 6 basic characters that had come with each set. There were 2 promo characters for each set that they were giving away at conventions, but I'm not sure if those will be included or not. So what do you got?
The first one is Sato, the Ocean Queen. She is good for banishing cards. She has an ability where she will banish the opponent's card, and then she also has a bunch of healing abilities, and one of those healing abilities has to do with the previously banished card. She will heal 1 for each banished card. So it kind of, that's her
Synergy.
Her whole combination is banishing her opponent's cards and then using those cards to heal.
So she's basically defense and control. And then also that slow ramp up of abilities is really cool. The first one of mine I'm going to talk about is Kairos the Time Bender. Now, Kairos the Time Bender, he's got a lot of very interesting abilities that allow, in addition to causing your opponent to discard cards or heal some of your own life, he's got a lot of abilities that allow you to ready one of your already played abilities, so to get it back in your hand. Now, because most of his abilities allow you to pick up one of the cards you've already played and get it back, his rest ability is actually one of the weakest in the game because it works like a normal rest, except it gets banished afterwards, which is removed from the game, to counterbalance that. But then he has a very interesting ultimate ability, where his ultimate ability literally is not played like a normal card. Instead, it is played after you've seen a round go through and you see that, your opponent has done an execute on you, or your opponent has done a really big attack, or the final attack and done the final damage on you. It's called Rewind because he has control over time, and it allows you to literally pretend like that turn didn't happen. Everybody takes their cards back, and you get to go again. You just, of course, though, to do it, you have to banish Rewind after you've already seen what has happened. So it's a one-use rescue me kind of card, actually making this a fairly good, even though they rank it as a more expert character, a fairly good teaching because because they're very forgiving. Because the first time your opponent goes to execute you, you're like, no, I'm not executed.
Okay, my second one is Kagamusha the Assassin. This character is all about extra damage. A lot of their cards have attack +1 on the next round. And also, their ultimate ability is just a second execute. So the assassin is just extra damage, extra execute, extra assassinating.
Yeah, their normal damage is actually fairly low. It's usually mostly 1 damage, but if you play a certain other ability before it, you could get 2 damage. And then the double execute is pretty amazing, actually. They're kind of an all or nothing character. Next one I'm going to talk about is Mata the Paladin. They are a super defensive character. They basically have a lot of abilities that help to defend or heal. Their strength ability lets you get your defense ability back, and their ultimate ability, Retribution, allows you to block everything your opponent just threw at you this round and then deal unblockable damage equal to the amount of damage they would have thrown at you back at your opponent. So blocking and countering, very straightforward, very easy to learn character, but can be actually interesting and surprising because of when you throw out that retribution.
Okay, my last one is Rocher the Illusionist. He's got some tricksy cards. He's got a card where you choose a number between 1 and 4, and your opponent has to guess it.
Yeah.
And if they're wrong, they get unblockable damage with the incorrect number they guessed. And then they have their ultimate ability is they're able to copy the damage and effects of the ability that the enemy played this round. But because both of those cards are a bit powerful, their just regular weapon card doesn't have anything besides the execute the rust card.
It doesn't even do damage on its own, yeah. Now, final character in this box is my favorite of all the characters in this box. It is Palash, the Tyrant's Heir. They have a really interesting play style. They play very different from any of the other characters here because their ultimate ability is an ability that you don't have to release. It is an ability that just starts out by default. You have to choose either Righteousness or Tyranny at the start of the game. And all of their cards have 2 extra effects, either Righteousness effect or Tyranny effect, based on which you chose. And at some point during the game, you get to switch if you're righteous, you become tyrannical. If you're tyrannical, you become righteous. And then totally change the playstyle. So the Tyranny stuff is usually extra damage, extra chances of executing, things like that, while the righteous side is usually more defensive, though on some occasions does more damage. For instance, their weapon one, if you choose Tyranny, the weapon is the normal execute, but if you choose Righteousness, instead it just does +2 attack. But yeah, it's generally an offensive versus defensive sort of thing. There's a lot of different effects. One of my favorites is their Judgment card, which normally it's their Strength card, and it's their most powerful one. It is normally 3 damage, which is pretty cool. If you had chose Righteousness, it also heals you 2, but if you chose Tyranny, it does Vicious, which says that if you counter someone, so in this case, they had done an agility based, if you counter them, you do double damage, and therefore it would be a 6 damage card, which would be insane. Palash is really awesome. I think they're one of the most interesting characters in the box. So now we're going to talk about why we would recommend you add this on as an additional purchase if you're backing the Kickstarter. Lynn, why don't you start off with your reason for why you would add on the Pocket Paragons Origins box?
Well, like it says, it's a great introduction to the game. They have some rated as advanced and an expert one, but they're still pretty easy to,
The abilities are fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
So it is. It's especially good for if you're teaching kids. Also, some of these abilities, even though they are more straightforward, some of them are interesting and different enough from the abilities in the other boxes that you're going to want to keep playing with these if you get them. Specifically, I think my favorites for how interesting they are Palash and Kagemusha. I love the extra abilities for assassination with Kagemusha. Is really cool. And it makes a character that's really all about winning through assassination versus damage. And Palash, the whole changing up the play style halfway through really can blindside your opponent, which in addition to how this is one of the better sets for teaching like a child how to play, this is also a really cool set with some really interesting, unique abilities. Again, even though they're more straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Pocket Paragons featuring Temporal Odyssey box, and what characters come in here, how they play, and why you would want to add this box onto your Kickstarter. Would you like to start us off on this one?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with Zane the Ender.
Mm-hmm.
He has his ultimate ability costs 1 to come out, but then it's a passive ability, and he gains Pierce on all his abilities, which Pierce deals 1 unblockable damage every turn.
Even if you were blocked, even if you were countered, it doesn't matter.
So he just slowly pings the other person to death.
He He's probably one of the easiest characters in this particular box set
Yeah.
because usually these guys are a bit more advanced. This is another one of the easier characters. We have Mr. F the Awakened. Mr. F the Awakened is all about is though a little more about timing your abilities correctly because his main ability is that while his normal attacks start off on the weaker side, they all have a boost ability. And to start with, you get the boost ability on whichever card you play right after doing his rest, which his rest is called Bask. And its specific effect is that you get the boost ability on the next card played. But also, as a 3-cost ultimate ability, has photosynthesis. So once you build this up and release it, it automatically gives you the boost ability on all your cards. So suddenly, once he gets his ultimate out, he becomes far more powerful. And then also his rest also does heal 2 for him once he has photosynthesis out. Also, one of the easier, more straightforward characters from this set, though I think a little more advanced than Zane because I feel like Zane's ping ability is very straightforward.
It is. Okay, then I have Christina the Sommelier. Her ultimate costs 2, but
It's really good.
it keeps the enemy from playing an ability the next round. So your opponent basically has to skip a turn.
Yes.
And then she has another ability
The
where
Rose Swirl.
where if she hits with it, she can exhaust her strength and agility cards and then add their hit effects to this ability. So she can combine 3 cards abilities into 1 turn.
Which if you do right after you do the intoxicate, you can be sure not to be countered. And then what would that giant combo do?
It would do 3 damage, heal Christina 2, and your opponent would exhaust an ability.
I'm laughing because she did this to me. This is a really cool character and is very precise about doing the right cards at the right time. Also, they have cards that allow you. They had a card there that allows you to get the strength and agility back in your hand to without doing a rest.
Yeah, it's the block. If you block damage, you ready your strength and agility.
So you can use them early to throw your opponent off, then get them back and still do your big combo effect, which is really awesome with them. So the next character I want to talk about is 413X, the New World Leader. This is a character that is all about precision. They are a big risk, big reward gamble of a character because many of their abilities are either the sort of thing where you could do a lot of damage to your opponent, maybe, but you're always going to do damage to yourself. Or, you maybe if you play them at the right time, you might do extra damage. Or if you play them at the right time, you might heal extra damage to yourself. In addition, their ultimate ability is very easy to get out, only costs 1. And once it's out, whenever you counter an enemy ability, you heal 1 and do 1 unblockable damage. So again, working off the counters means very much about precision, very much about reading your opponent, very much about timing your moves correctly. And to give you an idea about what I mean with the high risk, high reward moves, their main strength ability is Flamethrower. It does 4 damage to the opponent, but it does 2 unblockable damage to yourself, even if your opponent blocked or countered it. In addition, they have things like their repair ability, which is their intelligence ability, heals 2. And if you have not taken damage this round, it heals another 2, which is insane. And their block ability says if you block damage, you get to heal 2. However, if you timed it incorrectly and you did not block damage because your opponent played something like a rest when you played the defensive ability, which is called Cybernetics Factory, you would take an unblockable damage. So very high risk, high reward, precision type character. Definitely a theme with this box. They're a bit more advanced than the last box.
And my next one is Dematei, the Architect.
They're really interesting.
He's interesting because he has 3 extra cards.
Yes.
And his ultimate ability is passive. It's always out, so you start with it out. And whenever you counter an enemy ability or you play your rest card, you get to upgrade one of your strength, agility, or intelligence cards. And those are the extra cards. You basically swap them out. Wherever they are, that's where the new card comes in. So if it's exhausted, it comes in exhausted. If it's in your hand, it comes in your hand. And they're upgraded versions of the regular cards, which,
they either do a lot more damage or sometimes have extra cool effects.
Yeah, like the intelligence one does 1 damage. and your enemy must exhaust an ability, but the upgraded one does 2 damage, and then you get to choose which non-rest ability gets exhausted.
And then say the strength one. I like the strength one's boosted one a lot too.
Okay, so the regular strength one does 2 damage, and if your enemy plays the weapon card, you get +1 attack. The upgraded one does 3 damage, and if your enemy plays the weapon card, you get +3 attack.
Which would be 6
damage.
damage.
It doubles the damage.
Yeah, he's actually my favorite of the characters in this set because he is so interesting. Again, it's another one where he starts out slow, ends really strong, which is something that happens a lot in this. And again, you can ramp that up. You can speed that up based on the precision because while you get to do it once every time you rest, you also get to do it once every time you counter. You get to upgrade. So if you can start off countering before doing a rest action, by the time you've done your first rest action, you may have upgraded 2 of the 3 possible upgradable cards and become very powerful. Now, the final character, again, is another very precision, very start out slow and strong character, which is a big theme with this box. And that is Rowan the Sage. Now, Rowan the Sage starts off with some of the weakest abilities of any character in any box set. However, their ability is transform. They can shapeshift into like a big monster. And the way transform works, it's a passive ability that's always out. You need nothing to unlock it. It's always there. And it just gets triggered as soon as you counter any card. Once you counter, you suddenly get the boost effects, and the boosts become huge. So, for instance, the normal attack that they have for strength is 1. If they're boosted, they get +2 attack, so it goes from 1 to 3. Their normal weapon card is 1, but it gets a +1 when boosted. Their cunning ability, which is their intelligence-based ability, starts off with 1, but once it's boosted, you get a hit effect that says it gets +1 attack, and you may ready one of your other abilities. And their agility-based one, which is the best of all of them, is 2 attack normally, but once boosted, again, once you shapeshift, it gets +2 attack, and you block 4 damage, which means it becomes 4 damage, blocking 4 damage. This one is insane. But you have to get a counter off, and that's the thing is, if you get a counter really early, this character's amazing. If you get a counter really late, you could be a little disappointed if you haven't gotten any counters in a few full cycles between playing and resting. So what do you think? Like, why would someone want to add the Temporal Odyssey Pocket Paragons box to their Kickstarter?
I think if you just want to you want something a little bit more advanced, that's just like another step from the basic ones.
It's definitely more advanced.
Because it is more advanced, but it's still not that advanced. You know, like you're adding some extra abilities and you're adding some ways to do combos, but it's not anything.
It's not crazy, but
yeah.
But it's definitely the sort of thing that this is something you graduate onto afterwards, because a lot of these effects require you to be really good at reading your opponent, because you have to play the right cards at the right times for more than half of these characters. Because Mr. F the Awakened, 413X, Rowan the Sage, Christina, and basically all but Zane, because Zane's main thing is just doing the unblockable damage. Everybody else is about you really playing counters or the right cards at the right time to boost their effects or to do cool counter effects in some way. I would say also, in addition to just being a next step up, this has some of the most interesting abilities in the game. I love the upgrading cards. I love the effects where they're very high risk, high reward. It can be disappointing when they don't go off, but at the same time, it can be super rewarding when they do go off. Like when you counter the first enemy card with Rowan, you're like, you're dead. You know, suddenly you're boosted across the board. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Pocket Paragons featuring Rivals of Aether. Now these are a bunch of anthropomorphic animal martial artist characters, and these guys, this box set focuses in on more chances to counter, more abilities about countering, and no blocks. They literally give up their blocks so that each one has a second ability of whatever their affinity is. So if their affinity is strength abilities, they'll have a second strength ability. So they have more chances to counter what their affinity counters. And then usually effects based around countering. So Lynn, which one would you like to talk about first?
I'm going to start with Zetterburn, the Fire's Roar.
Okay.
So he's all about when he counters dealing unblockable damage, and when he is blocked, dealing more unblockable damage.
He also gets to boost his strength effects
Yeah.
after he does a counter, yes?
Yeah, when he counters, he has his two strength effects both have a boost, which basically one doubles his attack, and the other one he lets him ready one of his other abilities.
So this is a very interesting character in my opinion, because so the thing is that's all based on their super ability, which their ultimate it's a passive ability that's always out. It says again, counter, one unblockable damage, boom. But also boost the next effect. And the only guys who can boost are strength effects. So the thing is, you can use that to bluff somebody, make them think you're going to do a strength effect. They try to play an intelligence effect, and you're like, haha, I didn't actually play a strength effect. You did an intelligence to stop me. I'm going to do an agility and block your intelligence. Also, you could double fake them out, and they think you're going to do that, and then you really do play the strength and get boosted. Really, really mind-gaming character, don't you think?
Yeah, I think he's the most straightforward of them all, though.
He is, but that one element is very mind-gaming. It's very interesting. Now, the one I'm going to talk about here is Rastor, the Wind's Fury. He's kind of a raptor humanoid, and he says he's got a lot of hit effects, very much based around his hit effects. His ultimate ability is Wind Current. It is a ability that you do play, and when you play it, you get to store it after playing it. It does 1 damage, and its hit effect is you get to ready one of your exhausted abilities. If that ability has a hit effect, you can play that hit effect immediately. It happens immediately. So now most of the rest of his abilities all have hit effects. So his strength attack is only 1 damage, but it has a hit effect that says you may exhaust this ability. If you do, an enemy must exhaust an ability. Spinning Tornado is one of his 2 agility effects. It does 2 damage, and if you have more readied abilities than your enemy, it gets +1 attack. While his other agility card is Talon Spike that does 2 damage, and its hit effect is ready one of your other abilities. So you can see he's got a bunch of readied abilities, ready ability effects that helps him to then also be able to get off that +1 damage. He's got Rising Sweep, which is an intelligent effect, does 1 damage and does a heal. He has Feather Clap, which is his weapon attack that says if it hits after dealing damage, if your opponent has 4 or less hit points, deal an unblockable damage. And remember, whenever you get around to doing your ultimate ability, you're going to get whichever one of those hit effects you need a second time. This is a fairly low power guy, but he has some interesting combinations of effects in general that you can really use to outsmart your enemy. And of course, having 2 of the agility based effects gives you 2 chances to counter your opponent's intelligence card.
Okay, my next one is Orcane, the Puddle Jumper. And he's got a passive ultimate. It does cost 2 to get out, but once you get it out, all non-rest abilities counter enemy abilities that match their symbol. So he has 2 ways to counter. So
yes.
like his strength ability will counter agility and also a strength ability.
He becomes counter on easy mode. Yeah.
And then he has some other stuff, but it's mainly like you just have double
chance to counter. And then so he's to balance that out, none of his abilities do a lot of damage. Most of his abilities are only like 1 damage.
I think his second, because he's got 2 intelligence, and one of them does 2 damage, but then it also has vicious, so it could possibly do 4 damage.
Yes.
And because of his ultimate ability, he has double the chance to do that.
But that's like the only card that can do a lot of damage to him. Everything else usually does like 1, maybe 2 damage. And then, so like I feel like with Orcane, he has the best chance of countering everything, and then is playing the long game to slowly pick away at his opponents. And then as a great counter to him, we have a guy who doesn't care if you counter him a bunch. We have Rano the Poisonous Pacifist, because his ultimate ability, which again, he's all based around, a lot of these guys are very much based around their ultimate abilities and how they affect the counters. His ultimate ability is a passive that only requires 1 energy to get out. It is called Poison Stacks. At the end of each round, deal 1 unblockable damage. When your enemy counters one of your abilities or plays a rest, you lose all energy. So you get this out as early as you can, and it does have a side effect that is bad. It makes you lose some energy. And now you may be thinking, what do you need energy for once you've already got your ultimate out? Because usually that's all the energy is for. But the thing is, he does have some extra abilities that give him extra effects if he has some energy. He also has some nice little hit abilities that get him some extra effects. And the thing is, remember, even if your opponent counters you, once you have this out, you're doing an unblockable damage every round. So even guys who are great at countering and players that are great at countering, you can slowly pick away at them with this. And then to give you an idea of some of the extra abilities he has for his hit effects, his strength card is Toxic Tongue, which does 1 damage and has a hit effect that your enemy must exhaust an ability. He's got Quick Jabs as his agility effect. It's vulnerable, but if it hits, you get to ready an ability and only does 1 damage. Poison Darts is his first of his 2 intelligence effects, that it does 1 damage, and if you have no energy, gain an energy. So it's a way to get some energy back automatically, even without countering, even without resting, since you do want to have some energy. You have his other intelligence effect, which is Toxic Trap, which has stun and swift and blocks 2 damage. It's nice and defensive. And the real reason you want to have some energy, his weapon is Pacifist. It does 0 damage, but if you have any energy, it gets +1 attack and it becomes unblockable. Again, helping him to ping away at your opponent. You want to time that weapon right because you want to get it off before your opponent does a rest so that you can do some extra unblockable damage. This is another character that is in for the long game to slowly pick away at their opponent.
Okay. I have Clarin, the Flame Salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And his ultimate costs 2 to get out. And it's another, he can execute someone's ultimate.
Yes.
And then...
But it has a second effect for if they're passive, right? That was the whole thing?
Yeah, and then also if your enemy's ultimate is passive, you get +2 attack, and it already does 2, so it'd be 4.
So that this guy is probably the most offensively just damage-based guy in this pack, too.
And he's got 2 of his cards have Vicious, which is if you counter, it does double damage.
Which one of them can go up to 4 damage also.
Yeah. He's got a lot of stuff with
extra damage,
like
usually extra damage if your opponent played a certain card, because he's got like his weapon gets +2 damage if your opponent played a weapon. One of his vicious cards also gets +2 damage if your opponent played the rest.
Yeah, and if you countered an enemy ability last round, this round you get +2 if you play this card.
I think he's probably the most straightforward of the characters, actually, because he's just brutal on the damage.
But it's a little... Well, because he's got ones where, like, if you did something the previous round, then you can do something with this specific card this round. So I don't think it's as straightforward because you do need to do some planning.
Well, the other guy you were talking about, which was it Zetterburn?
Yeah.
He also, again, it was after you countered. You did have to plan it ahead. They both are. This is a more advanced pack for sure. I would say of the 3 we've gone through first so far, this is probably the most advanced. Mm-hmm. These characters do require some finesse to play. But this is probably one of the more straightforward characters from this pack. Here is Crag, the Earth's Bastion. Most of his effects usually involve the fact that you have just already exhausted 2 cards. So you've played 2 cards or exhausted them for another reason, and then they get boosted effects. He also has some interesting hit effects and such. His ultimate ability is a ability where you get to use it as a block. It also means that he is essentially the only character in this entire box that actually has a block, because his ultimate is essentially a block. It blocks all damage dealt to you this round. But if you block damage, you get to store it, so you can use it again. It's only 1 to unlock. And if you did not block damage, you banish it. So it is a riskier block, but he's the only one with a basic block. But then, like, his effects are like he has a Earth Pillar as a strength ability. If you have 2 or more exhausted abilities, it also blocks 2 damage in addition to doing 2 damage. Ground Spikes is the same thing, except it does +2 attack instead of blocking. So it goes from 2 damage to 4 damage. Rock Hurl is his agility based. It does stun, and if you have 2 or more exhausted abilities, you get to ignore all enemy hit effects, which is actually really great against a lot of the other characters in here who have a lot of really cool hit effects. Uppercut is his intelligence based one, which has Pierce, which means he can always do 1 unblockable damage, even if it's blocked or countered. But also, if this ability is countered, you may choose to exhaust it. If you do, you heal 1. So there's an option if you're countered to actually turn it more defensive. And then he's got Horn Slash, which is his weapon, which says if it hits, you may exhaust 1 of your other abilities. If you do, add its attack to this ability's attack. So normally it does 1 attack, but you could get rid of 1 of your strength-based cards to jump it up to 3 as long as you hit the enemy. So yeah, this is also probably one of the more basic and straightforward characters in the box. There are some far more advanced characters. So what do you think? Why would someone want to add the Rivals of Aether box for Pocket Paragons to their Kickstarter backing pledge for this version of Pocket Paragons?
I think if you really want the counters to, like, you
Shine.
know, yeah, show up more often, because a lot of the previous ones, it's like they had somewhere like if you countered, you got your a special something happened, but this is like the counters are front and center. Like countering is the whole point of these characters.
Plus, all of these characters both are easier to get counters with and easier to be countered on, because the thing is, remember, having 2 of a specific card means your opponent knows they have a better chance of countering that type of card. So like if Crag has 2 strength cards, you know you have a better chance of countering strength with an intelligence card. So playing with these characters means counters will definitely happen more often, especially if you're playing with Arcane, who puts like counter on easy mode. That guy is insane with counters. Yeah, definitely. If you want more countering, if you want more fun countering, this is the box to add to your pledge.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we're going to go over the Pocket Paragons featuring a.e.g.i.s. So these characters are all mech pilots and their mechs. Again, 6 characters. We're going to go over what they do and why you would want to get this box. Now, the effects of these characters, this box is themed around a lot of passive effects. There were also a lot of passive effects in the last box we just went over. But these guys, is everybody got a passive ultimate here? I think they all do. I think this is the most passive-heavy group of ultimates. Every one of mine.
Yeah, mine too.
So this is literally every character here has a passive ultimate, which actually, FYI, makes it an interesting one to play against the Rivals of Aether, who have some counters to passive effects and such. All right, so Lynn, why don't you go over one of yours?
Okay, so my first one is going to be Einar and Arc 150. He is all about not having to recharge, which is what they call the rest, because these are all robots. So his ultimate ability, it costs 3, but whenever you play an ability, you ready each of your other abilities.
Which means you never have more than 1 exhausted ability.
So he's...
Once that's out.
I mean... He's basically immune to being executed because he never needs to play the recharge.
Until he has 3 energy. Once he has 3 energy, he can be executed, but you can only execute him early game.
Yeah.
Once he has 3 energy, he's going to get that out, and then you can't execute him anymore. So you can only execute him early game, because once he has 3 energy and he gets that out, his other stuff is very basic.
It's very basic.
He's a very straightforward character. Would you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my next character I'm going to talk about is Stell and SOL 100. So Stell has this ultimate, again, passive ability called Eminence, where your damaging abilities get +1 attack. In addition to that, they have a lot of effects where you play them and then your next round's effect does bonus damage. And then they have some effects where their damage gives you other bonus abilities based on how much damage you do. Like they have a healing ability that says you do damage. It normally just does 1 damage. But you then heal as much as the damage you do. So you can chain effects with them, because if you get the Eminence out, that's already +1 attack for there. But then also, for instance, they have a agility ability, which says the next round of damaging ability gets +2 attack. So if you have out Eminence, you play the EP Laser Sonic, which gives the next round's effect +2 damage, and then you play EP Laser Justice, which is their healing ability. It normally only does 1 damage, but now it's doing 4 damage and healing 4. Also, you can, of course, use this as a really cool way to bluff your opponent. They think you're about to do that. They want to counter it. So what are they going to do? They're going to play their agility based effect to try to counter your EP Laser Justice, because it is an intelligence based effect, and instead you play EP Laser Buster because you lured them into a trap and counter their ability. There are some cool subtleties with this character that I actually quite like.
My next one is Gamound in GMD 100. So he's all about blocking damage.
Oh yeah.
And dealing unblockable damage.
Yes.
His ultimate is, it costs 2 to get it out. And then whenever you play a non-block ability, you ready your block.
Yes.
And then his block says if you block damage, you deal 1 unblockable damage. He's all about readying his block and then using it to deal unblockable damage.
And then like his strength ability also does a block too, right? It does like...
Yeah, he does 2, the strength does 2 damage and then blocks 2 damage.
So next I'm going to talk about a.e.g.i.s and IZA 100. So this is a character who their ultimate ability says all of their abilities have stun. And then their abilities, in addition to countering and stunning to exhaust opponents' abilities, usually have extra possible effects in case your opponent played a different card than the card that they counter. So they have multiple ways to get bonus effects. So for instance, their strength ability is Particle Bolt. So in addition to countering a agility based ability, and if you've already got your ultimate out, which only costs 1 energy to do so, so very easy to do, in addition to countering that and exhausting your opponent's agility based card, you also have the ability that if you played the strength card against your opponent's rest, it goes from 1 all the way up to 3 damage. Another one is an example that if you get a hit effect on your agility card, it does the ability to exhaust an opponent's card. You have Nanospores, which has a hit ability that says your enemy must exhaust an ability, so they have a lot of exhaust effects. Their weapon card says if it's played against an opponent's agility-based card, it gets +1 attack, so it goes from 1 to 2. But yeah, and then they have a single point of heal on their block. So yeah, a lot of versatile cards that can affect multiple enemies' cards in different ways. And then also, of course, the ability to really exhaust out your opponent's hand quickly if you get a lot of counters once you get their ultimate out.
Okay, and then I have Etwall and XL 100. So his ultimate costs 2. And it says your damaging abilities get attack +1 as long as your enemy has more ready abilities than you. And all of his other cards have things like when you hit, you may exhaust an ability, and if you do, you heal 2. Or hit, you may exhaust an ability. If you do, add its attack to this ability's attack, because you want more exhausted cards than your opponent.
Yes.
Because then you'll be doing more damage with the cards that you do have.
I actually think he's probably the most interesting character in this box. The exhausting your own abilities to make your abilities more powerful is probably got to be the most interesting effect of any of these characters.
It's like counterintuitive almost.
It is, but it's fun. It's kind of a cool ability. My last one is one I actually quite like also is Poppet and ELL000. She has a lot of effects where she can do extra damage to herself for doing extra effects on your opponent. But eventually, when she's able to get 2 energy and get out her passive Lone Crusade, she blocks all the damage that you deal to yourself. So she starts out early in the game hurting herself a lot to do big effects, and then just suddenly stops when she gets that effect out. For instance, she has a strength ability that says, hit. You may deal 2 damage to yourself. If you do, your enemy must exhaust an ability. And normally, it does 2 damage to your enemy. as another effect, her agility card does 4 damage, which is a lot. It is vulnerable, but also if you hit your opponent, you're going to do 2 damage to yourself. But again, once you get that card out, you're gonna stop that damage from coming to yourself. So a short while into the game, a round or two into the game, you're gonna nix all that extra damage, and then they have a intelligence ability that allows them to heal 2 and has stun, and their block ability also allows them to heal 1, so they do have ways to get back some of that life that they've done to themselves, especially once they've cut off the extra damage they're doing to themselves. Kind of like an easier version of that robot guy who wanted to conquer the world from the earlier box set, in a way. So who would we recommend the a.e.g.i.s box set to? What do you think?
I think this is another good one for if you're playing with younger people, like younger
Yes.
kids, because they're straightforward. I don't think they're as basic as the Origins,
But it's close.
but they're like maybe a half step between. So it's like it gives more variety and a little bit more advanced stuff, without going that full step to like the crazy counters and everything.
I definitely agree. I definitely feel like this, along with the Origins box, are the ones if you want easier to play, more straightforward characters, whereas the Rivals of Aether and the Temporal Odyssey are if you want more advanced play styles. So you think some of the other stuff are too basic? Go for the Rivals of Aether and the Pocket Paragons. You're playing with little kids and you want stuff that is very basic and straightforward, go for Origins and a.e.g.i.s. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now, as a final sum up, because we've gone through all of these boxes, Lynn, just all other factors aside, which box is your favorite? Which is the one you will just straight up recommend the most to add on to people's purchases?
I actually like the a.e.g.i.s one.
Okay. The Origins. No, a.e.g.i.s. I'm sorry,
No.
this one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The one we just did. I'm sorry, I got all confused. Go ahead.
Well, because we were talking about them all.
Yes, we were. I confused myself.
No, because and like I'm not like super into like giant robot stuff, so it surprised me. But I think it's like because it's not super basic, but it's still like easy to play while also being more interesting than the Origins one. At least I feel it is.
Okay. I kind of I get where you're coming from. I'm going to thoroughly disagree, though. I'm going to go with the one that I think is most interesting for me is the Rivals of Aether. And the reason I'm going to go for Rivals of Aether is I love how when playing with these characters, there winds up being a lot more countering. Because there are some games, depending on which set you're playing with, where countering doesn't happen enough. And that's not true when someone is playing with one of these characters. Countering happens a lot, and I enjoy that you get a lot more countering out of a game of Pocket Paragons with the Rivals of Aether. But actually, you know what? There's a reason to get every one of these box sets. Like, I mean,
Variety?
well, variety, of course, but like, okay, so for the Origins, I love that character in here. I forgot their name offhand, but the character who in the middle of the game switches playstyle. Like, I would want this box just for that character. Also, I love the characters in Temporal Odyssey who start out weak and get strong when something happens. Like, a lot of them, they start kind of weaker and then, boom, suddenly they're amazing. And I get a kick out of that. Like, it definitely does. And it really does come down to, like you said, the variety of it. But yeah, so your number one recommend was a.e.g.i.s and mine was Rivals of Aether. Let us know in the comments down below what you guys thought. Have you tried these and which is your favorite box of Pocket Paragons? Let us know if you're going to be backing the Kickstarter. If you do, there's a link in the description down below to head over to the Kickstarter and back it. If you enjoy lightning fast, bluffing out, countering rock, paper, scissors style card games, this is a really cool one, and it's really interesting that there is a ton of variety, and the new Kickstarter is going to have 2 new box sets in it, which are great that we didn't go over here because we don't have copies of those. But yeah, check those out and let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see us do more like it, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.